Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into Open for Business, Planet Earth's best Big 12 podcast. Thank you for joining me. I am your host, John Kurtz. We had two coaches yesterday, unbeknownst to me when I was doing the live video for you last night, that went to the podium and both shed some tears. That would be Kyle Whittingham and Chris Klieman. It has led to a lot of speculation about what is going on with those guys, what exactly was behind such charged press conferences, emotionally charged press conferences for both. And we're going to address that. We're going to take that head on because this seems to me to have been a topic that has drawn league-wide and in some ways nationwide interest. Don't you worry. I will get to the playoff picture. In fact, I put together a handy little rooting guide for you this week as we enter rivalry week in college football. We're going to get games Friday and Saturday that you will need to pay attention to. I've got it all made up for you. Having said that, I don't think the Big 12 has a great shot at getting two teams in. I don't think the Big 12 has a great shot at getting Texas Tech into the top four. But if it's going to happen, I will plot that out for you. Plus, what about Big 12 championship game scenarios if one of Texas Tech or BYU were to lose? They're both nearly 3 touchdown favorites, okay? But we have seen crazier things happen. I have one specific example of that. West Virginia fans, plug your ears. But remember, of course, West Virginia was a 28.5-point favorite once upon a time to Pitt and then lost that game 13-9, okay? So crazier things have happened. I'm sorry, West Virginia fans, for that. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel as you head in this evening. I appreciate everybody who is joining. Fill up the chat, make the chat lively. If you want to ensure that your question or comment makes it on tonight, you can click the $ below the chat box. That will submit a super chat, and it will ensure that I see your question. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you're not watching live and you want to submit a question or comment, I'll get to it on the next live show, which should be Tuesday following the release of the latest college football playoff rankings. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com or click the link in the description of this video. We are approaching 5,500 subscribers, and it's totally free to your inbox twice a week. Okay, let's get to the coaches. All right. Chris Klieman and Kyle Whittingham both shed tears at their post-game press conferences after a crazy 51-47 win for Kyle Whittingham in Utah in comeback fashion. It's led to a lot of speculation, a lot of question. Are these guys retiring? What's happening here? What's behind all of this? Let's start with Chris Klieman and K-State. Okay, let's start with Chris Klieman and K-State because obviously this hits more home for me. I have seen all the conversation about this. I weighed in on it a bit on the 3 Mod postgame show. Have not even stepped into it on social media because I think the discussion with everything happening around Chris Klieman's press conference and where he's at, I think a lot of it is just not nuanced nearly enough because there's a lot going on here. Okay, so the clip started to go around. Chris Klieman tearing up, getting very emotional, clearly just very bothered by some things that have been happening, and unloaded it in this post-game press conference scenario. So here's just a little cut up of Chris Klieman, a couple of the main clips that you're seeing go around about what he said to the media after the game.
Good. Understand that. We got your back. Got your back. Okay? We're about.
We're down so many players. And I know a lot of people thought we'd come over here and lay down. And that maybe the kids had cashed it in because I've heard it enough. I've heard I've cashed it in. I've heard the players have cashed it in. We need to get new leadership here. We need to get new players, new coaches. I'm tired of it. I gotta be honest with you, I'm tired of it. I've given my friggin' ass life for this place for 7 years. given everything for 7 years. And I think I deserve a little bit of respect. Because I'm frustrated like everybody else is, but I love those kids. And I'll go friggin' battle with those kids.
All right, that gives you a pretty good idea of what was going on there. There was also a moment where a reporter asked him, "Hey, what has you so emotionally charged here?" And he said, "You guys know." He just repeated, like, "You guys know, you guys know." And I know I got people in my DMs asking me from across the league, like, what is that exactly in reference to? I will get to that here. I think a lot of that is about Colin Klein being out there, potentially getting a head coaching job this offseason, and him being the apple of many K-State fans' eyes right now. Well, Chris Klieman obviously is still occupying this job. So there's just so much to unpack here with this, and this is what's frustrating is I see a lot of the discussion around this turning immediately to the fans that are very upset about where things are at and are just like, you know, be tougher, forget this, screw this guy. And then the other side, which is people just jumping to like, you people are all crazy for thinking that, anything's wrong here. Like, this is our guy. You better support him or you're a bad fan. I mean, it turns into that, right? This requires a lot of nuance to break down. So there's been a lot of heat this year. I mean, for one, I think people need to understand, like, it's been a miserable season if you're a K-State fan. They're 5-6. The coaches picked them to win the league this year. The unofficial media poll picked them to win the league. They were, in effect, the preseason favorite to win the conference this year, and they are 5-6. The season started with yet another loss to Iowa State, which, Matt Campbell has now been dominating that rivalry lately. That happened in front of a national TV audience. Some people were mad about playing that game in Ireland in the first place. So that's the jumping off point for this season. You have drama with Dylan Edwards. You have drama with Avery Johnson's family after the game, right? Then in September, I mean, the 3 games K-State played in September, there's no escaping it. They looked like one of, if not the worst Power 4 team in the country. They needed a last-minute heroic drive to beat North Dakota, and they played a horrific game against Arizona. I know Arizona wound up being pretty good. I don't think Arizona was a great team at that point, hadn't grown into it yet. And oh, by the way, K-State lost to Army, right? What program with expectations of winning a Power 4 league this year would go through that and not have a bunch of heat coming from fans? Like, of course that happened. You also have fans realizing like a lot of resources have been put into this roster. I mean, this is not like a Texas Tech level roster, but there was decent money put into this roster and this class of recruits that K-State has had, particularly Avery Johnson, the Avery Johnson era. There have been high expectations for this group, right? They were considered huge recruiting wins. Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, Jace Brown, Garrett Oakley. Most of these guys, big recruiting wins or developed like Jace Brown into studs. And it was like, hey, you've got this group, man. You sent Will Howard packing for Avery Johnson. And last year, mildly disappointing. Now this year has turned into a very disappointing group with all of these. And fans feel like, man, we thought this was going to be the step up and elevating the program, and now it's taken a step back. The other part of this is fans are acutely aware, very aware of what's going on with Colin Klein right now. Whether it's going to be the Oklahoma State job or not, which it might be if you're reading some of the tea leaves right now, he's probably going to get a Power 4 job this offseason. That is prodigal son, obviously beloved. He helped K-State win a Big 12 championship when he was the offensive coordinator in 2022. And I think people view him like, hey, this is our shot at getting a Kenny Dillingham here, a great coach, young, up and coming, cut out for this right now, and he might stay around long term because he loves this place. So you combine that with a slide from Klieman here this year, and fans get really antsy. Like, hey, we're going to miss the boat on this. And I think a lot of fans have felt like, hey, does Klieman really still have the fire in him right now to do this? Is this still the dude? It long has been talked about in K-State circles that Chris Klieman doesn't want to be like Bill Snyder, coaching into his late 70s and 80s and all of that. So people immediately jump to like, well, hey, what about retiring? And then we go get Colin Klein and it's perfect. Like there's been a lot of chatter among fans with that. I'm sure there has been some of that with donors as well. And I think like that's a lot of what Chris Klieman is hearing right now. And that's what he's taken a lot of offense to, I would have to imagine. is this idea that like, hey man, I won a Big 12 championship here. 5 of the 7 seasons I've been here, we've won at least 8 games. You're really not going to respect me enough to just say, hey, like one bad year here, one slide here, and you're going to kick me to the curb for a guy that's never been a head coach before. I think that's a lot of the basis of what's coming out there in that press conference, combined with, hey, we just went out against one of the better defenses in the country and a borderline top 10 team and set a school record for rushing and broke Darren Sproles' individual rushing record. Well, half of our roster, like many of the best players, are out. I mean, I'm still astounded by what they did to Utah. I have no idea how that happened. Even if Utah was loafing it a bit, I have no idea how they did that. Absolutely no idea. So it's all that. Like, I get where the emotion comes from. And that's where, for sure, the human side of me, like, understands the human reaction that Chris Klieman had there. He's looking at this like, guys, I put a trophy in the trophy case. Bill Snyder won 2 of those things. I've got 1. I've only been here 7 years. We've won 8+ games in 5 of those 7 years. Like, you guys are all bailing on me now, saying that I can't do this anymore. And taking shots at the team, right? Like my players, Avery Johnson's taking a lot of heat this year, this whole team. And we just went out and got that close to pulling off this huge win and then had the rug ripped out from under us. Like, I understand how that emotion comes pouring out there. I for sure do, man. I'm an emotional dude. I'm kind of an emotions on my sleeve sort of a guy. And being someone who's been in public spotlight a little bit, like very, very minor compared to Chris Klieman, obviously, but like people say things, it's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore sometimes. You guys have seen me react to comments, right? So I understand it's a little bit like glass house if I'm going to levy a ton of criticism here. But I think the flip side to that is I think there is some legitimate reason to wonder if Chris Klieman can get the program back to a level of being able to compete for a Big 12 championship, especially with the current financial constraints I think that K-State is operating with. I think they have dragged their feet a bit on where they need to be from an NIL spend standpoint this year, at least, because there was this thought, oh, well, the CSC is just going to shut down anything above the cap. All of that, I think, is legitimate reason for concern. I think a lot has changed in college football, even since 2022 when Chris Klieman last won a Big 12 championship. I think there's reason to wonder if he can get that back going. I think he's going to have to make changes on his staff to do that. And we've seen most of the hires that he has made, not all, but most, be pretty safe promoting guys internally or from his immediate network. And they've been kind of bland. If we're being honest, they've just been kind of bland. Now, he promoted Colin Klein, give him credit for that, but Colin Klein was right in his lap. And that was when they had the best stretch that they had, was with Colin Klein running the offense. And now he's about to be a head coach somewhere. Outside of that, it's not gone super well. Last year, we can have a debate about Connor Riley. It's not gone well this year with Matt Wells, which was a predictable hire. That was one of Chris Kleiman's best friends across the conference. So I share concern, as I'm sure a lot of K-State fans do. Who are you going to hire? How are you going to rejuvenate this thing? How are you going to fix this up? Especially if money's a little bit of a concern, right? There's kind of a dual layered piece of this to why there would be legitimate concerns. So I think you can be a fan and respect what Chris Klieman has done while still having legitimate concerns about, in this era and how much the sport has changed in the last couple of years, do you have what it takes to get it back to a level where you can be going and playing in a Big 12 championship game, which is what the fan base, I think, fairly expects that you should be able to do at least every couple of years. And you should be in the ballpark of competing for that, close to year in and year out, I think is the general expectation here. I would also just say, I wonder a little bit about getting too bogged down by the stuff that you hear, the outside noise that you hear, and the stuff that coaches always say players have to block that out. I mean, Manhattan is not a big media market. This is not a place where you're getting pushed. Like, look at Lincoln Riley. Like, Lincoln Riley got asked a question about a fan having a sign at College Game Day, and he's popping off at somebody. Like, there is a lot more pressure at big SEC jobs or really any SEC job or big Big Ten jobs. Like, you're going to get hit with a lot of this anywhere that you're at in Power 4 football. But I think Manhattan and K-State and that media market, something I was a part of for a long time, it's on the lower end of, what's going to be really harsh and prodding and stuff. So I do think at some point you have to just kind of realize, like, hey, we had a really bad season with a pretty good roster and a team that was supposed to be really good. So that's where I'm at on this. I have concerns about what he's going to do with the coaching staff, his ability to hire a staff that can elevate this team. I have some concerns about what does talent acquisition look like now in this era with the way that the sport has changed the last couple of years. I have concerns with, can you be more consistent with getting that type of an effort that you just got at Utah? Because total opposite ends of the spectrum. That Utah game could not be more polar opposite from like the effort that we saw against North Dakota and Arizona at the beginning of the year. How are you having a season where the swings are that wild? Is part of that NIL and what kids are thinking, and you're having a harder time dealing? Like, I don't know what it is, but I know that I've seen a total variance in that. Can you figure that out? And I just worry a little bit if this type of noise is getting to you that much. Maybe it is that it just shows some fire and you still got enough fire in you to go get it done and figure it out. I can understand feeling disrespected by people wanting a younger, newer model in your place there and somebody that used to coach under you. I totally get it. But I do have some worry about where this program is going. So that's kind of my nuanced take on it. And I don't think it has to be like one or the other. Now, as for the retirement piece of this, which I mentioned earlier, like people thinking, well, he's never been a guy that wants to coach for a really long time, they'll just retire. I don't think that's happening at all. Like, I think if anything, this press conference shows you like he's very fired up about the idea that people think he doesn't have it anymore and wants to prove that wrong. And I mean, his athletic director, Gene Taylor, literally walked up to the mic at one point in that clip you saw and said, like, you're going to be back next year. Obviously the AD's got his back. Like, I would not be putting a ton of hope in that basket if you're a fan that is like really hoping for a retirement or something. I don't think that's happening. So I would prepare yourself for that. But I have some legitimate concerns, and I think it's fair to have some legitimate concerns, and it doesn't mean that you're disrespecting Chris Klieman's accomplishments. So after the dust is settled, I know that's not like a real hot take on the situation, but I think this is what it requires. I think this is layered. I think there's a lot going on. So that's the K-State half of it. Okay. That's the K-State half of it. Now, what about the Utah half of it with Kyle Whittingham, who was also shedding some tears at his post-game press conference after that game yesterday? He's on the winning side of this. Now, keep in mind here, with Whittingham shedding some tears, this is the last home game of the season at Rice Eccles, okay? It's going to come into play because he will talk about the seniors. Obviously, senior day probably matters more to a place like Utah, more of a developmental program. You got guys who've been program guys, right? If you're at Texas Tech, Texas A&M, where, you may have some more hired guns, perhaps it doesn't have quite the same meaning as it would at Utah. So you can understand why there would potentially be some emotion there. But let's listen to this and then get to some of the analysis of this on, does this mean actually something more than just Kyle Whittingham being a little bit emotional about his seniors?
So happy for our seniors to be able to go out with a win, their last opportunity in Rice Eccles. Excuse me, when I think about our seniors, I get emotional, so I apologize. But it's just so awesome for them to be able to have that experience.
Okay, shorter, but there was Kyle Whittingham, I'm not a guy that's been watching Kyle Whittingham press conferences for a very long time, so I don't know how often something like this would be happening, but my guess is this doesn't happen very often. This seems like a very stoic guy, about as stoic as they come every single time that I have seen him talk. So I was taken aback a bit by this to see it, and of course, I started to wonder, well, hey, I mean, they literally have a head coach in waiting already, right? So, like, retirement has been talked about for a couple of years now with Kyle Whittingham. Is there more to this than just he's proud of, not just like, hey, the seniors getting their moment, but like the seniors did that, like on a day where we gave up a school record, a stadium record anyway, in rushing yards to an opponent on a day when we did that and played so poorly for so long and we're down by 10 with like 3 minutes left and we figured out a way to come back and win that game. Yeah, I could see how, like, you'd be, but I wouldn't think that would move Kyle Whittingham to cry. Then I saw this. I was reading Josh Furlong, which you should all do at KSL. Does a great job covering Utah. And this is what he said in his column about the situation. So he says he played it off as emotion directed toward outgoing seniors, a plausible fact given this year's roster makeup and his love of his players. But it was difficult not to mistake it for something more. A wild come-from-behind Utah win was likely his last as head coach at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and the emotions overtook him. So that's Josh Furlong's words there. On the beat, a wild come-from-behind Utah win was likely his last as head coach at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and the emotions overtook him. Josh said, no, Whittingham has not made a formal retirement announcement, but the writing was on the wall after an emotional win that left the head coach almost speechless for a moment. I know Josh made note that Whittingham's family was also right there by him at the press conference. I don't know if that's an every time thing or if that was a special thing here. The fact that he made note of it at least had me wondering, okay, maybe that's something else that you're thinking about too when you're taking all this into consideration. So it certainly has, look, I put a lot of faith in what Josh says there. It certainly moves me toward thinking this definitely could be it. If you're Utah, my initial reaction when I think about, okay, like for instance, Dave Aranda just got the vote of confidence. Well, he's sticking around, not more than the vote of confidence. He got, hey, you're going to be back next year. And with all the jobs open, I can understand a school in the Big 12 being like, I don't know that this is the year that we really want to be out searching for a head coach. And so my initial reaction when I hear like, oh, coach that might be leaving, I think, may not be the best time to be out there because there's just going to be so much competition for head coaches right now, right? Lane Kiffin's literally probably about to do like a little hat ceremony thing to pick who he's going to coach. But obviously this one, it doesn't matter. It's like, Utah's got the guy. It's going to be Morgan Scalley. You just keep the cohesiveness and roll on there. I'm sure that produces some anxieties for Utah fans, even if you are confident in Morgan Scalley. There's always going to be some anxiety with losing a legend. But yeah, this moved me much more into the camp of being like, all right, this needs to be on the radar. I don't think Utah is going to make the college football playoff. More on that in a moment. It's definitely less likely after their performance on Saturday. I think they're probably going to move down a spot or two in the college football playoff rankings. However, if that's it, that is a pretty fitting way for him to go out. Like a performance certainly befitting of what I think Kyle Whittingham's legacy is going to be at Utah, man. That's a program that fights. That's a program that grinds. It is a program that stops the run. So I get that, that piece of it doesn't totally fit the narrative, but to have a come from behind win where the team just didn't give up and Devin Dampier on a night when he is really struggling to throw the ball, his accuracy is not great. He throws a dart on 3rd and 22 that helps set up an eventual touchdown, which was also a beautiful throw into the corner of the end zone, and then has the 4th and 1 run that he takes nearly in for a touchdown, right? Like all these things that happen, very emblematic of like the toughness and never say die sort of attitude that you would expect from Kyle Whittingham's program. So thinking about that, if you're sitting here thinking about that, like, oh man, 1, just this is it in general, and 2, like this is it and it ended like that. Yeah, I can definitely see how you'd be getting caught up in the emotions of that. You also, if you're Kyle Whittingham and the fans, then you got to see Rice-Eccles kind of at peak Rice-Eccles by the end of the game. I know he commented on just how loud it was, and it sounded crazy loud on TV. I saw people tweeting about like national college football peeps tweeting about how you could see the camera shaking and stuff. Like it was very apparent how intense and great that atmosphere was by the end of the game, which also seems really appropriate. The stadium gets to, perhaps end that relationship with Kyle Whittingham by being at total peaking it out at 10, right? At 11, whatever you want to say about the stadium and where it was at. So if that's it, it's a cool way to go out. And I would even tie this together with the Chris Klieman segment that I just did there about where he's at and feeling, I think, disrespected by people that are like, hey, we got to go get Colin Klein. We can't, Klieman's over the hill. Klieman's done here. Kyle Whittingham had a couple of rough years, one of which was definitely really affected by injuries. Now, K-State didn't have the quarterback injuries, certainly that Utah had, and I am not. I can hear my three-maw co-host Cole Manbeck right now in my ear, like, don't use injuries as an excuse for this year. I mean, I'm not. But it is something that happened in the back half of the season that made it a little bit tougher on this team. After a couple of rough years, Kyle Whittingham came back, got the right guys in the portal. Obviously, there was patience with him. No one was going to run Kyle Whittingham out of there. And even if the fans may have been grumbling about some of that, they came back and had a near playoff season this year where they're probably going to go 10-2, assuming that they win at Kansas. Allen, I'm sure Allen's going to pop by and tell me I'm wrong about that later in this show. Okay. But they're probably going to go 10-2 after all of that. So that can be a little roadmap, perhaps, for K-State fans who are here. And maybe I'm even talking to myself right now and thinking, I don't know that Chris Klieman has it in him to get this back up and going. I think it's going to be an off season where K-State, for the first time in like 4 years, is not going to have much in the way of expectations at all, which can be good. And I think some of that probably true for Utah too. A place that had, they had won back-to-back Pac-12 titles. They come into the Big 12. They're the preseason favorite. Then it's like, yeah, there was some buzz like, hey, Utah could be a surprise college football playoff team this year and really make a push, but not a ton of that, and got to sort of lay low and then just sneak up on everybody this year, put together a really nice season and a really nice performance throughout the year. So anyway, some thoughts on very emotional coach press conferences after that game. There was a lot going on in that game. I would have never, ever, ever dreamed going into that game that I would spend as much time talking about it, that I'd be doing the post-game live the way that I was, and then coming back on here to double up and talk about it because of everything that happened with that. But that's sort of the beauty of college football, games that you don't think are going to be like that, games that you do not think are going to have any kind of emotional pull like that, they do, and they turn wild and crazy. So I would say that I appreciate that aspect of what happened on Saturday between K-State and Utah for sure. Okay, let's pop in a couple super chats. Reminder, click the $ below the chat box if you want to submit one of those. It will guarantee that your question or comment makes it on the show tonight. I greatly appreciate everybody who's able to do that. But even if you're not, just like the video. That's totally free. It really helps me. And subscribe to the channel. That's also something that definitely helps. You can subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com. Also, very, very helpful thing. Join the 5,400 plus Big 12 fans who have subscribed for free. Let's talk to Browns and Beers. Browns and Beers says, John, how about West Virginia flipping former Penn State commit when Ohio State was also pushing for him in Kevin Brown? Hadn't seen that. Tough to follow, recruiting with every school in the conference right now in the stretch run of the football season. But that's great, man. That's awesome. It feels like there's a lot of momentum with West Virginia right now, playing better in the back half of the season. And speaking of programs that have dealt with a lot of injuries this year, Rich Rod and company for sure. I have thought, like, Rich Rod seems like a guy that the hesitation for me is like, okay, I knew he could recruit back then. Can he still do it at this level now? But so much of that has to do with the resources that you have behind you. And it seems like West Virginia has done a pretty good job of equipping him with competitive resources to go out and do that. So I'm not surprised. I guess I'll put it that way. I'm definitely not surprised by that. Thing with football, it's like one recruit's not going to make or break a roster. You got to be able to do that over and over again and put it together. But it feels like there's a lot of positive momentum with the West Virginia program right now. So that's what I can give you on that. I don't know anything about Kevin Brown, but I hope he has a wonderful career with the Mountaineers, Browns and Beers. And thank you for being here, my friend. Let's see. Tim Joel says, you can come back to this, but what are your thoughts on Texas Tech not agreeing to the CSC rulemaking? Do you expect the Big 12 to follow Tech's lead soon? Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with that. So there is one important distinction that I was going to make on this. I saw Greg Flugar, who you should check out his channel, Peek Around the Corner, college football. He does an awesome job covering all that. So he pointed out that this is not, so I think people are taking this to mean, hey, Texas Tech is signing on to say, we don't agree, like we're not going to be a part of CSC, which is the group that is supposed to be overseeing like NIL deals above the cap, right? And people are taking this to say Texas Tech is like, no, we're not going to let them see all of our NIL deals above the cap and try to deem whether or not they're fair market value and all of that. And Texas Tech just shunning that, being like, no way. But Greg points out, and I think it's very wise and smart here, Texas Tech has already agreed to that because every Power 4 school did already agree to that when they signed the House versus NCAA settlement. When the House settlement was signed, that was a part of it. Like everybody agreed, okay, we're creating this entity, CSC, that will oversee NIL deals, make sure that they're all fair market value. And if you're doing pay for play, you're going to be in trouble. Like Tech already signed on to that. But what this is an agreement that will say that they wouldn't help a third party sue the settlement. And I saw some of the chatter. Look, some of this, I'll be honest, is a little bit over my head. I mean, I saw lawyers talking about this, like actually on Twitter this weekend, about the flaws in the argument there, that it gives way too much leeway and way too much power there for CSC to enforce a lot of different things and add different parts to it that aren't actually there right now. I mean, that seems like it makes sense to me that a lawyer probably would not like that language. It definitely makes sense that if there's anybody who is going to be as protective as possible about what they're able to do with their money right now, it's Texas Tech, because they've got about as much as anybody, and it's clearly working, right? The moment right now, it is very much so working. I have no idea if the Big 12 would follow Texas Tech's lead on this. I mean, because I think a lot of the Big 12 probably would prefer a world where CSC does enforce with a lethal hammer deals above the cap being actual market value, right? I think that's the thing you would have to understand here. Like, I don't think a lot of ADs in the Big 12 are like, yeah, let's sign on this being just a total free for all. So I've got to go worry about raising even more money and trying to compete with Texas Tech's money in my league. So, I mean, I guess as I talk through it, no, I would not expect the Big 12 to follow Texas Tech's lead, but I don't know. And I have no idea what this will mean as far as the future of it. I really don't know. It's pretty new. And I just, to be honest, we're in the season, unless it's some mass, like I haven't done near as much on everything that's gone on with the Big Ten and Michigan and all of that, because like it's the season, guys. I want to enjoy the season and talk about the season. I don't want to deal with all that stuff as much. So I understand why you care about it. I appreciate you asking. I'm just telling you, I have not gone deep down the rabbit hole on that, and what all that will mean. But anyway, I hope that gives you at least my main takeaway for you would be, yeah, I'd be surprised if the Big 12 said, yeah, we'll rally behind that, because they're, I think, looking now, not only before, I think before the season, they would have already been like, oh boy, like we're going to have to compete with Texas Tech's money and obviously SEC and Big Ten and all that. Well, now they're even seeing, okay, well, this has clearly worked for Texas Tech. They're obviously the best team in the Big 12. I'm going to do something that will benefit them disproportionately to everybody else. I don't know. I have a hard time seeing that. So let's see. Okay. I got to get my notes organized here. All right. Yeah. Speaking of just talking about the season, look, the lead of the discussion for a long time on these Sunday shows has been what's going on with the playoff picture. We're still going to talk about it tonight. Okay. After having a chance to look at the entire landscape after a pretty mundane, I would say, week of college football, there was not a whole lot of craziness. Here's where we're at. So both the Big 12 title picture and the Big 12's college football playoff picture, I think, is pretty clear heading into the final week of the regular season. Unfortunately, the playoff picture is not what we hoped. The Big 12 championship game picture, I think, for the league's sake, is what you'd hoped. Playoff picture is not right now. So as far as the Big 12 championship game goes, right, that piece, it's pretty clear, guys. If Texas Tech and BYU win, which they are both very heavy favorites to do so. They're going to play once again in Arlington and rematch for the Big 12 championship game. If they lose, there are some real chaos scenarios, but both Texas Tech and BYU are 3-score favorites. It was 18.5, I believe, BYU as a home favorite over UCF, and Tech, I believe, is a 20.5-point favorite at West Virginia, which is interesting to me because I know Tech is what we saw playing BYU. They seem to be the stronger team there, emphatically so, in fact. But I don't know, man. Going to West Virginia, and like I was just telling Browns and Beers, Mountaineers have seemed to figure some things out with Scotty Fox playing with more confidence for sure. That game would worry me a little bit more out of the two if I'm thinking about which one could actually be an upset. But I digress. I don't think either team will have much of a problem there. If they do, here are your chaos scenarios. Okay. Arizona State and Utah are the two teams still involved and still left here. Houston messed up their opportunity by losing to TCU, missing a field goal that would have tied the game and losing to TCU on Saturday. So you're talking about Arizona State and Utah. How can they get in here? Here is what we got for Utah first. Shout out to Joe Coles for giving us this here. Utah's path to the Big 12 championship game. They need BYU to win. They need Utah to win, quite obviously. They need Arizona State to win the Territorial Cup, and then they need West Virginia to beat Texas Tech. So, I mean, one, obviously, BYU, they're going to be heavy favorites to do so. Utah will be a heavy favorite to beat Kansas. Arizona State, what is the line on that game? Anyway, Arizona State certainly could beat Arizona, right? The first three, that's not really that big of a stretch, but then you need West Virginia to beat Texas Tech. That's the tough part. But that actually is crazy, right? Because that would give us, can you imagine Utah BYU round 2, Holy War round 2 in the Big 12 championship game spot in the college football playoff on the line? That would be absolutely wild if that were to happen. Now, not the best thing, I think, for the conference to have Texas Tech lose a game to West Virginia. That's probably going to knock them out. But that would be some theater if you actually got that game. So it is still possible. It is on the board, folks, that we could still have a Holy War Big 12 championship game if Texas Tech were to go down and there was an upset. All right, so we got that. What about the Arizona State part of it? Well, we turn to Chris Cartman here. There are only 2 scenarios in which Arizona State can make the Big 12 championship game. Obviously, both would require Arizona State beating Arizona. But scenario 1 would be BYU loses at home to UCF. That would put Arizona State into the Big 12 championship game. Scenario 2, they can get in if Texas Tech loses at West Virginia, but then Utah has to lose at Kansas, which I don't think that's either one of those is happening. The odds of Utah losing at Kansas at this point might be, I shouldn't say that. I was so high at Utah, by the way. I saw someone ask, they were 17.5-point favorites against K-State. And I was thinking, like, man, bet the farm on that. K-State beat up. I don't see how that's going to happen. So I should be cautious about Utah there. But Kansas just looked like a team that was totally dead in the water and lifeless on Saturday against Iowa State. So anyway, there are your chaos scenarios for the Big 12 championship game if we have an upset. Now, as for the playoff, okay, it's as simple as this. You are going to need multiple upsets for Texas Tech to get into the top 4 and or BYU or however you want to slice it, the Big 12 to get 2 bids into this thing. Sans maybe your scenario where BYU beats Tech in the title game. That is definitely your best shot to get 2 in. And I think that would be a real test for the committee as to how serious they're going to be about not punishing teams for losing in the conference championship game if that were to happen. But outside of that, you will need multiple upsets to get either Tech into the top 4 or to get BYU as an 11-2 at-large into the field. I think the Utah at-large thing is done. That is another thing that seems pretty clear to me. I would imagine Miami and Vanderbilt are going to jump them in the college football playoff rankings this week. We'll see, but I would certainly imagine that after Utah's performance against K-State. So here you go. Texas 20.5-point favorite on Saturday at 11 against West Virginia. As far as the playoff rankings this week go, I am a bit worried that Texas Tech would drop from 5 to 6 because they were tied already with Oregon in the AP poll. So, I mean, it makes sense that Oregon would jump Texas Tech in that scenario with a win over USC. But I wonder if the College Football Playoff Selection Committee will do the same thing, if they're going to give Oregon a big boost up there for that win above Texas Tech. Either way, it's really tough to see a path to Texas Tech getting into the top 4. Well, there is no path. It's not that it's tough to see. I mean, there is no path to Texas Tech getting into the top 4 without Georgia losing to Georgia Tech, Texas A&M losing to Texas, maybe Ohio. It'd be interesting to see what they would do with Ohio State if they lost to Michigan. And you may need 2 of those things to happen. It's not totally impossible, Georgia losing at Georgia Tech or Texas A&M losing at Texas, but getting both of those things to happen, it seems like a long shot. And I am, like I said, worried about what is going to happen with Oregon and Texas Tech here. So that to me it's looking less likely. I mean, it's looking very much right now like Texas Tech is headed for a potential 5 seed in a matchup with Tulane. Well, or whoever your G5 champ is going to be. Tulane is who I continue to see bracketologied there, mocked there, whatever you want to say. I don't think Ole Miss in the college football playoff rankings is a threat really to jump Texas Tech. I mean, the only thing left on their schedule is Mississippi State. And you've got to think about, I mean, Lane Kiffin, there's been talk about, hey, the committee takes into account what happens with your roster / I guess coach now. And we have this unique scenario where Lane Kiffin might not be the coach at this time next week if he's taking a different job, which is crazy to me. And it's a problem on many different levels about where we're at in college football and Lane Kiffin himself a little bit. But it is what it is. That could devalue Ole Miss in the committee's eyes. So I'm not seeing them as a real threat there. But yeah, so then I guess the last question I would pose here is, if, say it's at 6, say then Texas Tech is actually at 6, you get kind of the worst case scenario of all of that. Texas Tech is at 6. Okay, if they lose the Big 12 championship game, a relatively close, one possession game to BYU or something, they're there at 6. Are they going to still be in? Would the committee really drop them? You'd have to drop them 5 spots in a spot where you're not supposed to punish them. I mean, I do think that is a real scenario where the Big 12 would get 2 in and BYU would basically be a bid stealer in that scenario, right? For BYU, these are the games that you're talking about where you're going to need multiple upsets out of these. And it just, after the middle of this, mid to late October, things were getting kind of crazy and wonky. Really, November, we have not seen a ton of the craziness, at least the last 2 weeks in November. We have not seen a bunch of the craziness that the Big 12 has needed if BYU were going to have a better at-large opportunity here. Right or wrong, I'm not saying I agree with it. In fact, you guys know my gripe has been that Brett Yormark has not pushed for the resume of BYU compared to Notre Dame and Oregon stronger than he has up to this point. But this is what you're left with, okay? You need multiple things here. Notre Dame's at Stanford. They are 32.5-point favorites, okay? So we all remember the game I referenced earlier, West Virginia, Pitt, 2007, right? West Virginia, 28.5-point favorite, trip to the national championship game on the line, and they lose. Notre Dame is a 32.5-point favorite in this game, all right? Notre Dame just put 70 on Syracuse this past weekend. I don't think you're going to get that one. Now, Alabama at Auburn. Look at this. Alabama at Auburn. It's only a 5.5-point line there. Auburn's only a 5.5-point home dog against Alabama. Bama has played a bunch of close games this year. They almost lost to South Carolina. Now, Auburn is an elite loser this year. They are great at finding ways to lose games. So them coming through in the end is a bit of a long shot, but I think they'll be in. They could very well be in this game. That would not stun me at all. LSU at Oklahoma. It's a 10.5-point line. I'll say this. Oklahoma does not run away from teams very well because their offense isn't really good. So even with a more healthy John Mateer right now, I think LSU could stay in the game, and then you open yourself up to, hey, does something fluky or weird happen? it could be on the table. It could be on the table. Oregon at Washington. Oregon would be an interesting case. What would happen if they lost? Would they be totally out of the field? Potentially. They're only 6.5-point favorites at Washington. So again, a game that's on the table, but you would need multiple of these happening in the odds, when you start stacking those up against each other. They are definitely not great. They are definitely not great. So with all that being said, if you want a little rooting interest guide for the weekend, here you go. If you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com, once again, ofbnews.com, I'll send this to you tomorrow. Okay. So you wouldn't have to just screenshot it or whatever you might do watching it here on YouTube or Twitter or wherever you are taking this in. But this is what you need. Top 4, need a couple of those for BYU's at-large chances. And I would also point out, I didn't talk about these games a second ago, but you got to worry about Miami and Vandy being teams that could also jump BYU here with wins this weekend. And that's why I put that on the rooting interest guide. You would rather see Miami lose to Pitt, who did come alive this weekend after getting drubbed by Notre Dame. They bounced back to beat Georgia Tech. And then Tennessee and Vandy, where Vandy is an underdog. That is the one spot where it's like, hey, team that you're rooting for is the favorite. That would be Tennessee at home against Vandy. But you can see there, it's still a pretty close line. And a note on that Texas game, I mean, you do have to, it seems like the committee is pretty much done with Texas, even if they were to beat Texas A&M, but you just never know. You just never know with that Longhorn logo. That could be a team that would make that sort of a jump. Could Texas make like a 6-spot jump for beating Texas A&M? I don't know. Maybe. And I do think that one could happen. Respect to Texas A&M and what they've done this year, but I do think it's fair to point out strength of schedule as far as the SEC goes. They've had a lot of the bottom half teams in the league the way the schedule broke this year for them. So I think they have benefited from that a bit. I could see that game happening. But anyway, that's what you got heading into the weekend. If you're a Big 12 fan and you're hoping for the best possible outcomes for the league, or obviously if you are a BYU fan or perhaps a Utah fan, you're going to need a lot of that chaos going on if you are trying to get an at-large bid. Honestly, what you need more is you need the path to that holy war rematch in the Big 12 championship game. You got to be, if you're a Utah fan, you need to be a huge West Virginia fan this weekend. Go find a couch, go find one of those little hats, go find, a big rifle that you can walk around with, whatever it is. That's what you need this weekend if you're a Ute. All right, let's pop in with a couple more super chats here real quick. JPAP says, chance Texas Tech makes the college football playoff if they lose. If they lose at West Virginia, that's not happening. I do not think that's because, well, let me go back through those scenarios. Is there a scenario where they still make the Big 12 championship game? I guess I would say this. I mean, obviously they still could. If there is a scenario where they lose to West Virginia and still make it to Arlington, I mean, they can definitely still win the Big 12 championship game and go. They're not getting an at-large bid if they lose to West Virginia. There's too much traffic in there right now. It would give them a second loss. I think that you lose the benefit of the doubt with the committee at that point, where they seem to be getting a lot of benefit of the doubt for the Arizona State game being without Baron Morton and playing with Will Hammond. So, yeah, I don't think that's happening. If they lose the Big 12 championship game, maybe you caught it. I discussed it earlier. But I do think at that point, if you're 6 and they're not supposed to punish you for losing in the Big 12 title game and you lost like a one-possession game to BYU, who at that point would be ranked like, number 11-ish in the playoff rankings, it's hard for me to see that they would then drop you out. But never say never with the committee. Once again, we saw TCU at one point. They were the 3 seed. They beat Iowa State by 50, and then they were the 6 seed the next week and got left out of the playoff. So never say never, but that my feel on that would be lose at West Virginia, no. Lose the Big 12 championship game, yes. Michael. What's up, Michael? Michael says, if Kiffin goes, Ole Moss has to get FSU'd. All right, help me out here, Michael, or anybody in the chat. I'm not fully understanding this here. Moss has to get FSU'd. Oh, you're saying Ole Miss has to get FSU'd. Okay. You're saying if Lane Kiffin goes, they should drop Ole Miss from the playoff. Man, I know we all hate the SEC, guys. I can't get behind that. I can't get behind that. I would hate that. You don't do that to that team, man. I think that would be incredibly lame. Honestly, I thought what they did to Florida State was pretty lame. So I do not endorse that idea at all. Ole Miss has been a worthy team of a college football playoff bid this year, and just because their coach is going to bail on them after making a public spectacle of his job prospects here over the last couple of weeks while they're in the midst of this run, no, I would feel terrible if they did that to Ole Miss. So, and again, I get it. You're a BYU fan. I understand the benefits of that and why it could be potentially good for the Big 12. But as much as I love the league, I can't endorse that. I would hate that they would do that. And, some of that's like, hey, I know Lane Kiffin's a good coach, but a lot of the coaching aspect, I mean, yeah, he's calling the offense. I'm sure there are guys that could they're not. I don't think Ole Miss would fall off to being a non-playoff team just because Lane Kiffin isn't there. I would put it that way. Okay. I'm sure they lose some little bit of an edge. I don't think it's fair to say, hey, all of a sudden you're not a playoff team. So love you, but I do disagree on that one. I do disagree. And look, I get this point too that TMGL is making. Hey, they did it to the ACC. Look, I'm not going to cry myself to sleep if it were to happen. I just would feel really bad for the kids. It would be funny to see at SEC. I mean, imagine the SEC fit that they would throw if that were to happen. The same people that would have been celebrating Alabama in over FSU a couple of years ago would have been, they'd be going apoplectic if that were to happen. It would be great. It would be great to see all of that, but I would really feel for Ole Miss's players. I don't like that. It feels dirty, man. It feels dirty. And I think losing your starter, if we're going to debate this, like the nitty gritty of it, losing your starting quarterback, I think impacts the game much more than losing your head coach. So I think if you're talking about what each of those teams would be, I would say that it makes more sense, even though I didn't agree with it. It makes more sense to do that to Florida State if they lost their quarterback than Ole Miss if they lost their head coach. All right, Michael's with me. Yeah, it really shouldn't happen. 1,000% agree. Michael is with me. But actually, Michael, I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't even thought. I mean, I knew I brought it up earlier. Hey, they've talked about that could hurt them in the rankings and maybe they'd fall back a little bit. But I hadn't thought. I mean, hey, if they're sitting there at like 6 or 7, would it be enough that the committee would say, all right, fine, you're out of the field? I had not even considered that. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm definitely glad that you brought that situation up. Okay. All right. Yeah. Got to all the super chats. Thank you guys. I think I'm going to wrap up with that. Appreciate you all being here. I should, you know what? I think I said earlier I'd be doing a live show Tuesday night. I am going to be gone Tuesday night. So maybe Wednesday I can get you something on the college football playoff rankings. I won't be working the day job on Wednesday. So hopefully I can do that, but I will be out of town Tuesday night. So stay with me this week. I'll be getting you some live content, but with the holidays, like throughout this entire week, the schedule is much different. I'll be working it in between that. I hope all of you guys are getting a chance to spend time with friends and family and see your loved ones, travel if you're traveling, whatever it might be. So we'll make it work, but just stay tuned. That's where you need to make sure you're subscribed, click the bell so you get alerts when I'm going live or when I drop content. That is definitely the way to do it. Of course, go subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. You can follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz as well. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you have a question or comment that you want to get to and you didn't catch this live, hit me up there and let me know. And yeah, with that, guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday night. Have a great start to your week. I hope it's a short work week for you with the holidays, and we'll talk soon.